Writer, because she also writes short stories, but we'll get into that.
Would you prefer a writer?
Poet sounds good.
Okay. All right. 3, 2, 1. Hey, folks, welcome to Bouncing Brains. I'm Sean Hatfield.
And I'm Freddy G, and we promise that on this episode we will not talk about porn.
I was not informed of that stipulation.
Well, now you know.
And now that you've made our guest uncomfortable, let me introduce her.
Well, good luck.
Our guest this evening is Priscilla Celina Suárez, writer, poet. Any other hats you're wearing, ma'am?
No.
Okay. That's fine. Occasionally we get the polymaths in here that just like to do a little bit of everything. So, Freddie didn't mention, are you, do you have a specific workout right now coming out or
I just released a book last year. It's been a while. Titled Cuentos Where That Told Me That Scared the Beeswax Out of Me. And it's a collection of short stories of leyendas, of local folklore.
Right on.
Like, for example, the duendes, La Llorona, that type of creepy folklore that we hear here in the valley.
Right on.
Yes.
Serious question. I know I fuck with you on this, but you do know what she means by the legends that she mentioned, right?
Yeah, I'm familiar with La Llorona and duendes and all that. Yeah.
No, it's because Norman, because he's white, right? So I'll fuck with him.
Are you from the valley?
I keep telling him I'm 33 years old and I've been here my entire life.
He's been here, so that doesn't count. He's from the valley.
Yeah.
He's more valley than anything.
Because what I'll do is, like, when somebody really says like a real Spanish word, I'll be like, Sean, this means this, and he's like,
he probably knows more Spanish than you. Leave him alone, Nina.
The gaps in my knowledge are the places where it's real easy to tell because I'll just go, yeah. Know exactly what you're talking about. Right on. Specifically on the more of the cautionary tale type of legends.
Yes. Basically, focus more for children and for more for like elementary children, middle school children, and I had in mind my nephews. My nieces and nephews who love those type of cuentos, and they grew up listening to my mom telling them those type of cuentos. I grew up listening to my grandmother tell me those cuentos, and they were our bedtime stories. That of course, we would fall asleep with them, but we would wake up. We would wake up in the middle of the night crying.
I was about to say you had an awesome childhood.
Yeah, did you ever have those type of cuentos told to you?
Yeah, I did when I was younger. But it was more so like my older cousins would tell us like the whole legend, and then he would say, and if you don't go to sleep, she's going to walk out in the middle of the night from that door. And I was like, I was like 5 and shit. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, and there's various different types of tellings of the Duérmete mi baby. Have you ever heard that lullaby? Duérmete mi baby.
Is it like the English one? It's the lullaby baby or something?
It's like based on that, but they sing it talking about cucuys. Like the version that I grew up hearing was Duérmete mi baby, porque si no te duermes va a venir el cucuy y te va a comer. That was a type of thing. And then my grandmother would knock on the window or knock on the wall. And so it was kind of coercing us to go to sleep, but yeah.
Cucuy means boogeyman.
He knows what that means.
Well, his short-term memory, I'm the one that indulges in things, and this one can't remember anything. We actually had a conversation on this podcast about, and another comedian uses it as a setup for his joke, but it's an interesting philosophical proposition that the loss of the boogeyman, the cucuy, the various, kind of like, don't do it or, they'll get you. He was making the argument that we don't have that proper caution kind of instilled in children because we don't kind of give them that. It seems weird, like to kind of make them more rational as adults, where they're constantly going like, "Wait, how could this be a bad thing? How could this, because you want to be aware of the possibilities of how things could just go completely wrong." But to instill that instinct to just kind of go, wait a minute here, you have to kind of scare them a little bit when they're young.
Yes.
Just a little bit. It's a psychological tactic. I understand, and you can't take it too far. But yeah, I was going to say I didn't get the boogeyman bedtime stories as a kid because my family was into psychological maintenance. They were basically, it's like no, don't shift the fear away from us. He must fear us.
So it wasn't Cucuy, it was your dad's gonna come whoop your ass.
Okay, yeah. Got it.
If you're a bad little kid, I'm gonna come through that door and beat the shit.
Pretty much.
But yeah, that's interesting. Did your nephews end up enjoying the book?
They did. They recognized all the stories because they're stories that they've heard from my mother. And they're also stories that are regional. So they're not really my stories, they're our stories. And all of us have heard them, but they just come in different variations. They change.
So like, and I'm only asking this question because of the climate that we live in now. Like, you know how you said, it's our legends and I'm aiming it for the kids. When you actually I think it's a good idea. Like, I'm on your side, but when you actually put the book out, you didn't fear like that you may get that you may receive backlash because you're releasing these kind of stories to like kids and maybe modern parents thinking that it's a bad influence. You know what I'm saying? Like,
it's a bad influence. There's always going to be negativity. Yeah. That's one of the things about being in the whole literary and arts community. And I guess just in the community, just being in the public, you're always running that. You're going to have criticism no matter what. But by sharing these stories, they're the stories that I grew up with. And that's one of the things that you have to teach children. These are leyendas, they're folklore. Doesn't mean that they're real. They're fictional. So that's one of the things you have to teach kids also. But there are leyendas and there are cuentos that came about for a reason. Yeah. So it's, you have to do your investigative work. There's actually a local professor, Dr. David Bowles, who is a professor at UTRGV. He has several books based on leyendas, regional folklore, and he did a lot of research on his books. And they're all leyendas that we grew up listening to here in the Valley. But he goes and he talks about the folklore. He talks about the fictional ghostly stories, the haunted stories, the leyendas themselves. And then he goes and talks about the facts. So in his book, he has 3 different stories, 3 different narrations of the same cuento. So he goes and he does his work and he talks about how all our leyendas are here for a reason. There's a backstory to them. And so, there's been a lot of work, a lot of scholarly work done on our leyendas. But there are cuentos, there are stories, and I think it's our job to keep our histories alive. Leyendas are part of our history.
Exactly. It's very well put. You have to pass the story along, or the story doesn't get passed along,
and it dies at some point. Have you ever tried or attempted to write your own, maybe help me with the word, the F word,
fiction?
No, folklore.
Oh, folklore.
That shit. Have you ever tried to write your own shit? That word, like your own story. That way?
I have. Yes.
Oh, like you have, like you've done it, like it's done.
It's done. I've had it published I've had some published in different anthologies. But for example, one of them being Nana's Mirror. Nana's Mirror. It's actually based on something that was factual that happened with my family, which was my abuelita Doña, my great grandmother Doña. She would always say that we needed to have mirrors in the kitchen. And so with her thing, she was saying that mirrors were the way that families or your ancestors could look back at you. And for her, it was, the kitchen was the family space. So we always had that mirror. And so now the mirror hangs in one of my mother's bedrooms. And I look at it and it's really creepy. It still creeps me out. I don't believe it, but it still creeps me out. For example, like the leyendas, I don't believe them. But still, if I wake up at 3 a.m, I have to make sure my feet are covered. Because, duendes or whatever.
Yeah.
So I know they're not true, but it stays with you. Because maybe they might be a little bit true.
Well, I mean, that's I think that's the whole thing about that. Like the possibility of like every story, it doesn't matter how old you are, you get to an age where you're like, no, I know it's fiction. But what makes it work is how believable, or not even how believable, but how the possibility of how realistic it is that it can happen. Like if somebody actually wanted to, that it would that it can happen. Like for example, I don't know if you all ever seen that movie, Urban Legends.
Yes.
The first one.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. So like this dude, this person went recreating the legends that they had read about. And my point is that I think that's what makes the legend or the story kind of like intimidating or scary, that you're like, oh, well, it might or whatever.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, well, I think there's, I can't remember where I was reading this a while back, but something to the idea of, children just kind of have irrational fears. They just fear, granted, spiders, snakes, heights, there are certain things that just, because as adventurous a creature as we are, if they're not afraid of certain things, they'll just get themselves into trouble and damaged. And then, those taking care of them would be upset. Anyway, regardless of that, they have irrational fears. They'll just wake up. I remember being a kid and just having dreams there were no images. It was just fear. It was just that unspoken, unidentifiable fear. And I think there's something to the idea of kind of handing them as detailed a description as possible. That, for example, talking about waking up in the middle of the night and just having one of those like moments. I think in that moment, instead of just being like, "What am I afraid of?" It's just being like, "Okay, what are the thoughts going on in the background of the brain?" And if you kind of have that imaginarium of kind of set stories, set pieces, basically, that you can kind of, vampires, werewolves, and monsters, oh my, type of things. Just, you can go, okay, whatever it is, I know this thing has rules and details, and I can imagine it. And it's kind of a way to trick the brain, where instead of having that irrational moment of fear where you just allow yourself to spiral into, well, what's going on with my finances? How about my love life? Oh, my job. And
those stories are more scary because they're real shit.
Exactly. That was the case Rudy was making with the whole Kukui thing. It was it's like, oh, don't be speeding next to a state trooper, Kukui.
It's like I used to run this bit. I used to run this joke, but I stopped running because it wasn't that funny after a while. But basically, the whole punchline was. And it was more of being fear, like setting fear, but also being spontaneous. Mm-hmm. How do you make your marriage last, man? And I talk about me having a conversation with my brother, and me telling my brother telling me, no, man, I've been married for 10 years. You got to understand that you got to do something fearful but spontaneous for your wife. You have to do it to keep her intrigued. You have to be spontaneous and fearful. Do it. Do something. And I was like what? Not pay the mortgage? I mean, that would be the scariest thing, So, yeah. And back to what Sean was saying, it's true. Like stuff like that. as you continue to grow, as we continue to become adults and deal with different things in our lives, that fear of kukui doesn't necessarily go away. Kukui turns into the tax man, basically. Tax man is kukui, you know? So
exactly.
See, that's kind of what I was saying, though, because the real world doesn't have set rules. There are general rules you can kind of follow, but they're just stuff can happen at any moment, at any point in time.
At any moment, you're right. Yeah,
the plane could come crashing through the roof right now, but if you have the legends, the folklore, that kind of thing, you know the rules. The vampire can't get me if I wear the garlic. If I don't ask the leprechaun a question, he can't steal my gold. Whatever that is, just the various things along that line where
No, isn't the leprechaun? The leprechaun, you're not supposed to sing the rhyme with him or some shit like that.
Oh, dude, there are all kinds of various. That's one of those things you were talking about, the historical basis for some of the legends.
Yeah.
That stuff always fascinates me when you go back far enough and you realize that, well, we had a story over here and we had a story over here. Kind of hard to remember two stories. We'll just kind of jam these together and,
yeah,
supernatural.
And
but why?
It's interesting how they're universal.
But
folklore.
It's funny how we're talking about this and we say, no, well, we know that it's not true and so on and so forth, and they're just stories that were passed on. But how do you honestly feel I've actually never asked you this, but how do you feel about those stories that we do hear that it's like, oh no, this really happened? Like, for example, I was here, we went to this place and they said that it was haunted and I didn't believe, but I went and I actually saw the girl or whatever. I'll give you an example. I first of all, I don't believe in that. Because I've never seen anything, I've never ran into anything. Granted, I don't want to, you know what I'm saying? If it does exist, I don't want to run into it, but it's never happened to me. But I used to work at this call center. I'd rather not say the name, but I used to work at this call center. So way back it's pretty old. Way back in the day when the call center first opened, there was supposedly a little girl. That building used to be a warehouse before it was a call center. So long story short, there was a little girl that was suffocated in that warehouse or whatever. And again, according to theory or legend or whatever, that little girl never left, right? So because it was a man that suffocated her, she stayed there, and supposedly she's angry, so she will only appear to men, right? But always late at night, and always in the same area, in the break room area. So they say, right? So one day, because I became really good friends with one of the security guards. His name was Solomon, and he was the same way. He's like, "Nah, Fred, but I don't believe in that shit, man. That's just shit that Mexican people make up and shit." And he was Mexican too. He was like, but it's bullshit that they make up, whatever, right? So one day he was working the late shift from 3 to 12. So he was like, "Hey, Fred, I don't have a ride, man. Like, can you give me a ride home?" And I was like, "Yeah, man." So I walk out and I'm there waiting, whatever. And he was in the break room, and again, he's a security guard, so he was the last one to close. So he's there, whatever, and he comes out, and then he came out the first time, and he peeks, and he's like, "Hey, man, can you get down? I need help with something." He was turning everything off, so I come in, and then he said, "I'm gonna go over there." And there's another lady that was cleaning, and he was like, "I'm gonna go over there and get the lady because her daughter's here, and she scared the shit out of me. I hadn't seen her, And I just saw like he was like she's on that side. I'm gonna go get her mom, and then I'll come back. And I was like, all right, cool. So I'm sitting there, whatever. But then I got up, so I was like, well, where's this little girl? Right? I never heard it. So I'm there looking. I didn't see anything, whatever. And then he comes back, and then he's like, Fred, let's go, man. Let's go. Let's go. And I was like, the little girl, man, let's go. I was like, okay. So we leave or whatever. And then we're in the car, and I was like, dude, what's wrong, dude? You're pale or whatever. He's like, first of all, dude, the cleaning lady already left. Nobody would leave without their child.
Yeah.
Right? So, in long story short, he says that he clearly saw a little girl that she must have been like 4 or 5 in a pink dress, and she waved at him. And he was talking to her. He was like, hey, where's your mom? And she kept pointing at the door, and that's why he had gone that way or whatever. And he told me, he was like, dude, but there was nobody there. Like, there was nobody. And I was like, bro, I think you're high. Like, you're smoking something else in that pipe. He's like, no, dude, I swear, I saw the little girl. And then the next day, he told some of the people that worked there, and everybody said the same thing. He was like, vio la niña.
Oh,
like,
wow.
They were like, he saw the little girl. Like, everybody, like, they were saying, he was like, and then, like, everybody was cool about it. He was like, yeah, because every now and then, there's a little girl that comes in here. Then I looked at him, and I was like, and you're just going to sit there and be fucking cool about it? Like, yeah, there's this little girl that walks in and scares the shit out of people. I mean, but don't be alarmed, you know? So, but yeah. So my question is, with story, again, I've never seen anything. I don't want to, but I've never seen anything. Stories like that, do you believe in them, or have you ever experienced something like that? Honestly.
I have never experienced them. I want to say I don't believe in them, but then I still get scared. I still get frightened. So I want to say I don't believe in them, but there's always something in the back of my mind. But for example, I've seen some of those stories happen in real life. For example, La Llorona. Let me explain how I mean. La Llorona is it's a Mexican. I don't know how far back it goes, but it's a Mexican mythological story that goes back to the Native Americans from Mexico. And basically it's a woman who's crying, looking for her children, walking by the river. It transitions here in the valley where a kid can't walk by the canal porque, well, who's going to show up? La Llorona. Okay, so that's how I grew up seeing that. Now,
see, and that's not what I was told.
See, I grew up basically the Llorona growing. For me, when I was growing up, any body of water, that was La Llorona coming and looking for her children. And now, another perspective that I have of it is with the whole separation of families. For me, the Lloronas now are the mothers crying for their children and looking for their children and searching for their children. So for me, like now, the legend of the Llorona has become a reality, seeing mothers searching, begging for their children, looking at other children and wanting their own children with them. So I see it now when I see the whole separation of families, seeing mothers crying and never knowing if they're going to find their children again, and just wondering wondering about when they're going to have their children back, but wandering through life. My lenguajes, sorry, I don't know if it goes through. Wandering with the W-A. Wandering through life, through, their daily routines, searching for their children. So for me, they've become a modern version of the Cuento of the Llorona, of the mother looking, and with the whole idea of the rio that separates them, as they're deported and their children stay behind. That's a different aspect. It became a reality now. When I see it, that's what I see. I see the Lloronas crying for their children who have disappeared. So in a sense, they're the ones that brought their children across. So in a sense, it's a guilt that they... I don't know, I'm making assumptions here, but I feel like mothers, they might have the guilt with them, not being able to to defend their children, not being able to be there for their children, and not being able to have stopped that separation. So, it's just...
so you relate the current events that you see and that you experience now.
What I see are the Lloronas. That's what I see. Yeah, that's what I see. So it's something that changes the whole idea of folklore.
But you didn't write that in the book. Oh,
no. But, it's a very strong...
The legends that you wrote in the book are like straight how they were told.
How they were told to me. Yeah. Or how I remember them. Maybe they weren't told to me like that, but that's how I remember them. I'm pretty sure I changed a lot of the stories around trying to remember how they were told.
Yeah.
But
that's crazy. And I had never thought of that. I had never thought of relating it to like the things that are like going.
See, there's a lot. We're going through a lot of transitions. We've been going this like past handful number of years. We've been going through a lot of transitions in the valley. The past decade itself, for example, one of the things that I mentioned are the invisible borders that we have. I see for us when we're growing up, going to el otro lado del puente, to the other side, crossing the bridge was something that was so natural. The bridge was something that connected us to el otro lado. But now we have this fear of insecurity and seguridad that we don't take our kids to el otro lado. Like my nephews, they don't know what it's like to be in Reynosa. They've never gone to Reynosa. So for them, it's a completely different country. It's not, a sister city. Like Reynosa isn't a sister city to them anymore. And so that's one of the transitions that we've gone through. But there's so many changes that we're going through. And I just feel like it's very important for us living here to be documenting our stories. It doesn't matter how we're documenting them, but it's important for us to document them. We don't need people to be documenting them for us anymore. So it's really awesome. We have an awesome community. We have, basically, I like to say that we're all compadres and comadres. We all support each other, which is very important.
Homie, Sean.
He knows that. Déjalo.
The confused look on my face is me biting my tongue, going, there is a latent streak of every man for himself in the valley, but yeah. The best interpretation possible is yes, everybody. It is very supportive down here.
We fight a lot, we argue a lot, but as all families do. But it's awesome to see how the community comes together. How and I would say in the past, decade or so, how now the problem is, where do we go? There's too many events happening. Where do we show up to tonight? As opposed to there being no venues for us to show up to. And that's really awesome how the community has embraced us also. So,
for the most part.
For the most part, yes.
Remember off air, we had that whole conversation of radio and stuff.
Yeah.
And because I explained to her kind of the history, the very short history behind our podcast and why we brought it about. So but it goes back to that we don't have the ability, or the doors are not that easily open for us to just approach a radio station and be like, hey, I have this, I have this creative art form or anything like that. So that's when things like this come into play.
We've had a couple conversations with folks that have been in radio, and one of the points that keeps coming back up over and over again is that as commercial radio has moved away from being involved locally, you know what I mean? They don't necessarily, every blue moon, you'll get one of the, somebody at the station will go like, hey, I've got a buddy doing a thing. We're going to bring him in. You know what I mean? Whereas you don't see them regularly putting the effort into going out there and trying to cover some of the local music scene or art scene or something like that, which, as you pointed out, is kind of, it's sad because, one, you would think that would be part of their business model, but two, there's so much going on now that wasn't going on.
It's crazy how much is going on.
Yeah. We were having that conversation a couple days ago about Festiva, and sometimes you look at what, their event section and you go, I can name at least another dozen things that you don't have listed here. So What the hell, man?
Yep.
And it goes back to the accessibility of things. And I feel that there's ever since I started going again to Luna Coffee House and everything, and when I began to put my foot back into comedy, I started to realize of like how much actual talent is overlooked. Like I've met in this very short period of time that I've been back into it, especially down here in the valley. I've met so many very talented like musicians. Like that I'm like, dude, you could record if you were to record this and put it out tomorrow, I would buy it. Like you know what I'm saying? And I don't understand how they don't have more exposure, you know what I'm saying? Which leads back to the conversation that we're having to where our local radio stations, it feels like they're not approachable or what have you. You know what I mean? So I feel, and again, it leads back to this, to where I feel that this is the best way that we can offer something closest to some kind of exposure of exposing your actual art. Same thing when it comes to poetry or playwriting or whatever. You have these books and this art that you've published, and you want to get it out there, and you might be able to put it in the store. But if you don't have a way to let the world know that it's out there, then they're
That's
not
very
gonna
true. Yes.
find it. You know what I mean? And I think back to what you were saying as well. It's very important for us, whether you're a poet, a writer, a comedian, for us to have that, not to lose that connection within our community, so that we can not only be the comedian or the poet or whatever, but also be that local support, that they still feel that intimate connection with that artist. Because I was telling Sean the other day, man, that I feel proud when I see somebody coming up.
Yes.
Like I feel good when I see Mario doing his thing, you know, Raymond, because they all started like us, you know, they started like from the bottom or whatever, and they worked their way up, and I tell him, I was like, that's why sometimes I feel that in some areas we have to like step it up, and again, that's why we created this, and we continue to work on our comedy, and I feel that as long as we continue to work and not lose, it's very important, like I said, not to lose that connection and that hand with the local community. I mean, we can uncover that talent that's been here.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things I like to point out is why it's very important to support our community, to support our peers, or other writers, like for me, other poets, other writers that are going out there and winning awards, that are going out there and introducing their work to other parts of the world, and they're successful at it. One of the things is their success is our success, because they're putting all eyes on our region, and it's very important for us to support each other. And there are a lot of other border communities, but there's no other border community like ours. Our border community is very different from any other border community. So it's very important for us to be honest and to be true, but also to support each other, because we're opening up doors for each other. There's nobody that's going to be taking our spotlight away. That's not what our community is about. We're here to support each other and to, sometimes bring each other bring each other back to reality, but we're there to be supportive. That's what we do in our community. And that's what I see. And it's awesome to have that, or to have somebody to just talk to, somebody that's also a poet, to have that community of people that you could talk to, and they could share their experiences. But it's very important for us to be able to have that contact and to be able to have that circle of people.
Yeah. And not to lose it, because I feel, in a sense, so my grandfather used to always tell me, if you forget where you came from, you'll lose your identity of like who you are. Like never forget where you came from and always keep a hand, there in one way or another.
How would you guys, speaking about identity and where we come from, how would you guys describe yourselves or label yourselves?
I'm Mexican.
You're Mexican?
I know that's not what you meant.
No, well, in a sense, it is a little bit what I meant, because when I describe myself, or when other people describe me, they'll call me a Chicana, they'll call me Mexican American, and I've always tried to figure out what label best suits me to say, I am Mexican American, but I'm from the Valley.
Well, on the food stamp application, I always put Latino. Yeah. So, I still get denied the damn food stamps, but when I attempt.
When you attempt.
Yeah, it's what I do. No, but yeah, I to answer the first question, I do identify, and there's some people that speak against it because they say that I was born here, but I always identify as Mexican. Mm-hmm. I never say Hispanic. I don't even think I've ever said Latino. Everybody that's ever asked, I've always said I'm Mexican. Yes, I was born here, but I come from a long line of beaners, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's not one American real American that I know that's like within our family. Then if you go into the identification of and I don't know if you do, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're going into the identification of how to identify as to as far as what I do, like my art form, it's just I'm a comedian. I'm a comedian. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I'm just curious how because I have a lot of trouble. I struggle a lot with figuring out how should I label myself. It's really difficult to explain who I am by putting those labels and explaining where I'm from.
Exactly.
On kind of the flip side of Freddy's explanation of it, when somebody pushes me on it, I usually tell them Irish, but the joke on the it's a bit of a dodge, you know what I mean? Because it's like saying white. Since the inception of it, it's basically how many different flavors, you know what I mean? But it's also the Irish are one of those peoples that, I do have Irish genetics, but they're also they're an island of mutts, basically. They were the dumping grounds for Europe for, a couple of thousand years. And, the idea of Irish heritage, which one? I think when it comes to the labels, though, at least for someone like myself, I'm very much kind of an individualistic, you must carry your own burden type of person. So I don't, the group identity doesn't really help me any, it's like, well, I find strength, and it's like, unless we're hanging out on a regular basis, the idea that you're out there doesn't really help me any. But finding the smallest ones possible, comedian, writer, meat eater, as opposed, just finding those little definitions, and then kind of to the point where it becomes just this wall of noise is the knee-jerk word I want to use, but that's not quite right. It's almost like you're shining so many different lights on it that it just becomes that kind of all-encompassing, white light. It's just it just is. You are. And it's I was listening to someone talk about this a while back, and it's like, okay, if you keep chopping yourself down to, I think it's 17 different qualifiers, identification labels of some sort. Yeah. You've basically trimmed yourself down statistically to, 1 in 7 billion. So it's the idea of kind of going, okay, where's my group identity? And then kind of realizing that filters down to the point where you're just an individual. At the end of the day, ain't nobody got the same backstory. Nobody's,
Yeah.
Granted, if you're trying to get sympathy of someone, it's like, I too know I've got my card on me. Let me in, damn it. But
I used to say this at work. I mean, because for some reason at work, they would ask me that question. They would see they would tell me, "Hey, identify yourself. What's your name?" Well, that depends who's asking. To you or to the government? Because to you, I'm Freddy, but to the government, I'm Pedro de Pacas. Just making, and I would make jokes. I would make jokes, and then again falling back to the whole immigration thing or whatever, and even some people that wouldn't catch the joke would be like, what do you mean exactly? And I would go back to what I said earlier. Let's just say that on paper I check a lot of boxes. That's all I'm gonna say. So yeah, but like what Sean was saying, at the end of the day, the best way that I could put it, and I was thinking of this when Sean was talking and explaining that, at the end of the day, I also feel it's like a double-edged sword. I also feel that we shouldn't have labels. Because I feel that it's the labels that have made us forget what we are. First of all, not who we are, but what we are. What I mean is, I feel that the labels have made us forget that overall we're human. And I feel that because we forgot that we're human, that's why we label ourselves, and it makes other people feel superior to other people, and it makes you treat people different, because somewhere down the line we ought to forget that we're that we're human, you know what I'm saying? And we've had this conversation too, and I've told Sean, man, I was like, I don't care if you're white, black, orange, Republican, Democrat. Like I told him, I was like, whatever happened to me being able to treat you like a person, whatever happened to me being able to treat you with respect. Like I don't care if you're white or whatever. Like I should be able to treat you as a human being, first of all. Then, depending on the situation, then treating you like I mean whatever it is, but not judging right off the fact. Oh, he's white, he's a certain way. He's Mexican, he's a certain way.
And I think
I feel that that's what labels have done.
Yes, and I feel like with this political climate, labels have become very important.
Yeah. There's a label for
everybody.
For everything.
They become very important.
Yeah.
Well, to kind of push back to play cynic to Freddy's shiny idealism here.
Your shiny idealism.
It's not idealism, but go ahead.
But it's very shiny.
Every once in a while, we switch off on good cop, bad cop.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this: have you, in your search for, how do I identify myself? This is a leading question because I've done so myself. But have you come across any? It's like, this looks like a good label. Like this seems to fit all the brackets. And then the more you kind of sit with it, maybe you go, no, it really doesn't. I mean, has there been that moment? I mean, I only ask because you brought it up.
No, you know what? There's been times where I've called myself Mexican. I've said that I'm Mexican, not because of nationality, but because of ethnicity, and I'm rejected by Mexicanos because I'm not Mexican. So
those are the ones I hate the most.
No, and
but you're not Mexican, motherfucker.
And that's how you get Jesse.
Exactly.
And then it's just they don't claim me. Like even calling myself Tejana, I could say that I'm Tejana, but does Tejana represent only the valley? Like me being only from the valley?
No, Tejana generally means
all of
all of Texas.
Yeah,
you were born and raised in Texas, and that's.
And then by saying it, not saying Tex and saying Tejana, you're saying you're Texan, and you're kind of putting in there your Mexican ancestry, but it doesn't mean I'm from the Valley. So how do you?
Well, then also you trip over. I mean, every once in a while you get somebody who has their family genealogy going back to the Spanish land grants, and they're like, no, Tejano specifically refers to.
Exactly.
Like, okay.
And then, like, I have one family member, and we have this argument all the time because this particular family member, and I don't want to put them out there like that because they actually do listen to us. But this particular family member, they're Mexican. First of all, like I said, I come from a long line of beaners. But they don't identify themselves as Mexican. They say that they're Hispanic American. And I tell her, first of all, you're confused as fuck because Hispanic, if you go back and you look for it in the modern day dictionary, it says that Hispanic is of Spanish descent, meaning Spanish from Spain. And then she tries to give me the whole backstory of like, well, there was the sailors, and I was like, yes, but at some point that chain, was broken. And the fact of the matter is that, again, I lean back on what I said earlier. We come from a long line of beaners, you know what I'm saying? But their thing is that, oh no, like they're like all American, which is fine. Like you have your patriotism to this country. You're American. You were born here. There's nothing wrong with that. The only thing that we've always had a problem with is that she's so-called American that I feel it, that she denies her true Mexican root. And that's what I have a problem with. There's nothing wrong with like claiming your patriotism because you live here. I love this country. Mm-hmm. There's people that will tell you different. That I don't. No, I didn't mean you. I'm just saying. I was waving my hand.
I've heard some evidence.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying. That'll tell you, that you don't, that I don't, or whatever. But it's not true. I love this country. I do, because I mean, there's a lot of shit that I don't agree with. Mm-hmm. But it's just like your big brother, man. You're never gonna get along. Sometimes you're gonna disagree with it. You'll find some common ground and move on. But my thing is that I just can't relate, or I bump heads with people that deny, either with words or with actions, like their own race. And this applies to everybody. I've seen white people that say that they're not white. And it's like, well, dude. And I don't understand that. Why would y'all deny that y'all are white? Y'all have good credit. Y'all have great stuff, man, that we don't.
Well, this goes back to what I was saying, man. It's like the idea of white and black in America was specifically that was your original divide and conquer right there. Yeah. It's like shit. We can't shit on the British versus the native born Americans anymore. I have an idea. But yeah, man, it also talking about, as far as like, you can't deny where it is you come from. That concept is, that's where whitewashing comes from. It goes, who cares if you're, Czechoslovakian, French, Norwegian, you're white now, Sparky.
And they get mad when I tell them. I was like, you know what? Your problem is that you're fucking whitewashed. That's your problem. And they get, I'm not whitewashed. And I was like, why is it so hard for you to say that you're Mexican? Because I'm not. I'm Hispanic. Fuck. Yeah, but basically.
Yeah, I would definitely agree that the idea of kind of entrenching yourself in any kind of personal label, you know what I mean? Like, as you pointed out, and in the current climate, everybody's kind of scrambling for their label and they're holding on for dear life. And it's like, no. Collect as many as you can, but in the process, don't go, well, this one kind of covers all these, so I'll get rid of these. And it's like, yeah, but this one's not it. just because all of these fall under this doesn't mean that this defines all of these. These all have their specific, for example, the kind of stuff that goes on back and forth between vegans and vegetarians, where it's like, it's that much difference. I mean, what are we talking about? But in some cases, that's very important. There are people that go like, no, specifically, I am a vegan, and here's my reasons. And you go, okay, that's fine. And I know I pick on the vegans a lot on this show. I don't know why.
Because you don't like them.
No, it's not that I don't even. Not that I don't like them.
Yeah, it is. I can tell.
Yeah, you can sense the anger, the resentment, the antagonization, the antagonism.
I do. Too.
I think you just don't understand them.
No, I do because
I think I've met too many that don't understand themselves.
Okay.
I've met some vegans that can lay it down for you, and at the end of the day, you go, "Yeah, I'm still going to go kill a baby cow," and they're like, "All right, that's cool." They understand themselves, and they understand the difference. Where that definition lies,
and I love when they ask about why would you kill an animal, because they're fucking delicious and deep fried.
You tell them to stop being so tasty and all.
Exactly. But
one thing I wanted
to now something, and I just want to throw it out there real quick because of what you said earlier. Something that pisses me off now. Is the fact that people, and again, in this climate, people are now saying, "Oh, I identify as black." It's like, no, man. This is like Chappelle said. No, that is trans talk, ladies. You can't identify as black. It's like, and again, this comes more so in the realm of people that are like, they're mixed. They're like, half white or half a race or whatever. And then they may also be black. So they feel that they're like, I need to identify as black or whatever. And it goes back to what you both were saying, that everybody feels that a label is so important. It's almost like if you don't choose a label now, people feel that they're going to get lost. Oh, if I don't have a label, they're going to forget about me. I'm going to be left behind. And it's like, chill the fuck out. You're still a human. Relax.
Well, that's where my question was going as far as the sorting process where you're trying to find that, it's something I think that takes place in adolescence. I mean, regardless of whether or not you give the kid some kind of narrative to go by, they're going to question the narrative. You know what I mean? The narrative kind of allows them, you go, this is who we are. This is who your family was. This is where we come from. This is, and then they can kind of wander around that path. It gives them a stable place to kind of come back to and go, that didn't work. So I'll come back here. But looking for the label, looking for the identifier, looking to kind of lay down their own definition of themselves.
Yeah.
I think if you're doing it honestly, you trip over a few that you kind of go like, no, this is it, and you go, nah, that's not really it. So that's where the question was going as far as have there been any that and like you said there. There's some that seem like, no, that perfectly defines what I'm trying to say. And then you talk to someone else and you go, well, if they don't think that okay, well, shit, now I got to find a new one.
It's tough doing that. But at the same time, all of us have people labeling us.
That as well.
So, that makes it even tougher. For example, growing up here in the Valley, my grandparents and my family from El Otro Lado would call me a gabacha. I'm a gabacha, I'm a gringa. But in the Valley, we're calling other people gringos and gabachos because in the Valley, it doesn't feel like we're gringos and gabachos. We still identify as Mexicanos a lot of the time. But at the same time, you don't feel like you fit in. But it's, people are always throwing labels at us and, trying to identify as themselves. And so that's really tough when you don't feel like you fit into those labels or that you belong only with that label, or sometimes you don't agree with the label.
And I've never asked you that, and this is a serious question. I'm not fucking with you on this. but you as a person, because I know for sure that you know who you are and all.
Well, I'm not a coffee table.
But what I was gonna say was, how do you feel? In the past, I'm pretty sure it's happened. Like, does it bother you when people refer to you as a gringo?
It all depends on the circumstances. I think we actually
when they say, like, it's just an example. Say that we're played out here, whatever, and you're passing by, and these are your friends. These are people you know.
Right.
And be like, oh, I va al gringo, meaning that there goes like that. Say that they use it in that context, in that reference.
It depends on whether or not. For example, I got guys that I grew up with since I was in my, before I was an adolescent, that they kind of know that I'm a little bit prickly about the, growing up in the Valley. It's that one got thrown at me a couple times, and the thing was, I kind of had to come to a point where it's like, okay, if it's someone that's from the Valley, you know what I mean? It's like, all right, let me explain to you why that doesn't qualify here. We're both from the same place. There's no
exactly.
Neither one of us is going to get out. Whereas, as I stated before, I've had a couple of people. I'll be hanging out with someone and it'll be like, oh, this is so and so. He's from Tamaulipas or whatever, and then like I'll just be listening to something, blah blah blah, gringo, and it's like, okay, we're going to have a discussion now because. I am where I'm from, so where?
Because by the way, he hasn't told you, but Sean likes to fight. Sean will only the speaking goes so far before he starts swinging. So
and this is that self-discovery process. I've become a very friendly and nice, cordial person by going through a lot of anger, aggression, and resentment.
Understood.
Yeah, it's. Again, it goes back to the context of the word. Like I said, I got friends that I grew up with that they understand. Like I've had that discussion with them, and they'll throw it out there just to fuck with me. But and most everyday occurrences, it's never going to be important. You know what I mean? It's like it doesn't matter what you call me as long as you call me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. For example, like us that are of Mexican descent, we're living here in the Valley.
Not you, Sean. She means me.
No, like, one of the terms they use for us we're pochos.
Yeah.
Pochos is a derogatory term.
Yeah.
But I've had recently a friend of mine, Isaac Chavarria, who's also a local poet. He identifies as a pocho and he claims it. It's true. I'm a pocho. I'm of Mexican descent, and I don't speak proper Spanish. I speak, as we're saying, I speak Spanish real mucho. I speak English real mucho. So he claims in his book, it's titled Pocho. And he claims it. And I'm like, you know what? I'm a pocha too. Even though it's been thrown at us the way sometimes like gringo has been thrown at you. And it's been thrown at me too. Like, I'm a gringa in a derogatory sense. Why should it? We're gonna claim pocho. It's true. We are pochos.
And
there's nothing hateful about it.
What I'm about to say, it's only because I've heard a handful of black people that were my friends before,
mm-hmm.
but I've heard not a lot, quite a few. I want to say maybe 5 mm-hmm. throughout my whole lifetime that have said that. That's the reason that they don't have a problem using the N-word mm-hmm. towards one another, because it's a derogatory term that was used to enslave their ancestors, but we use it proudly because us using it shows the other person that we're not afraid and we're not oppressed by the word. Now, there's people that there's black people that disagree with that state of mind and all that, but it's all in how you take it. Perfect example. is that's where Anti and Marcus clash.
Right.
Because they're both black, you know what I'm saying? And we're going to have them in here next week sometime. But that's
kind
what...
that the difference in opinion that, or at least from what they both stated on the podcast before, kind of goes to a point I wanted to make, which was if you make that choice to kind of, reclaim the title or repurpose the word, the second part of that statement is, and then you must never use that word in the derogatory sense ever again, which is, it's like, okay. At hell with it. There's just so many examples. We've all kind of seen that, I would assume, at this point, where, whether it's in person, which is very likely, or just in some representation somewhere of, someone, we're reclaiming the word blah, blah, this and that. And then the next second turn around and, but except for that over there. Which was a kind of Anti's thing where it's like, he was talking about that he doesn't use it in a positive.
Yeah. Like him, Marcus used it, and Marcus, if you listen to this, you can come in and correct us. But as far as I remember, Marcus was using it like as an embrace. Embrace, to embrace the people, his friends, so on and so forth. Anti was using it as in, I only use that word when I want to point out somebody that I don't trust, that I want nothing to do with, and that I don't trust. You know what I'm saying? And it's the same thing with us. It's like people that call, according to them, the correct term is, hey, Mexican, so on. They're Mexican, so on and so forth. But if people want to be derogatory towards us, they call us wetbacks and beaners because of how supposedly we got here. And it's up to us as a person on how we take that. And I fall back on what Sean said earlier. I don't give a fuck what you call me as long as you call me. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not going to make me think any or feel any different. But then again, me, because I have thick skin, I understand that there's other people that don't have that thick skin or whatever the case may be. And now that I have a kid, like now that I have a child, I do think about it a bit more, because at one point I'm going to have to explain this to her. And I'm going to have to teach her, like, this is wrong. This is why it's wrong. This is right. This is why it's right. And then at the end of the day, she's going to make her own decision, just like I made my own decision on what route she's going to want to take. But at least show them right from wrong and give them the choice at the end. You know what I'm saying? And also explain to them that just because they feel that way, they have to understand at all times that not everybody around them is going to feel the same way about that particular word that she may choose to use. So that's why you have to let them know you're going to have to learn to use it at your own discretion, and you might get some consequences out of it. Yeah. That's all I'm saying.
Vocabulary is very interesting.
Yeah, very,
sometimes, it's very interesting. Something so simple, something that we feel is so simple, just gets thrown in a whole different level all of a sudden.
Yeah, it's like I didn't know, man, and again, I didn't know because I'm not fucking Italian. I don't know. I'm gonna give you two examples, but I didn't know that you're not supposed to call Italians Guidos,
because it sounds like such a term of endearment.
Well, I mean, I didn't even know. I didn't know, man. I mean,
I have no idea where that one came from, but I was fairly aware that. Okay, yeah, I get you. I get what you're saying.
The other, okay, I'll give you one better. And this I learned in when I was living in California, because living in California, Los Angeles is very diverse. So I used to work at a CVS. Long story short, I was doing my job, checking people out at the register, whatever, and this dude got really offended because I called him. This Asian dude got really offended because I called him Oriental, and he flipped out. He's like, "I'm not Oriental, I Asian." And I was like, "Motherfucker, I don't know. All I know is you run from God's in the same fucking way. It's all I know." I didn't say that, but no, he got upset, right? And then he looks at me, and he says, "Well, how would you like it if I called you Mexican?" And I was like, "What kind of fucking works out? Because I am Mexican." And he looks at me and he's like, "Well, you look fucking Puerto Rican." And he walked out.
No, que no, cabrón.
So he walks out, right? So then there was a white guy behind him, and the white guy looks at me and he's like, "Hey man, what's going on?" I was like, "I don't know." I said Oriental. He grabbed his shit and took off. So then my manager comes in and I pull him aside. I was like, "Hey Robert, let me talk to you real quick," because I knew he was probably gonna come back and complain, and you know what I'm saying. So I was like, "Hey Robert," and I explained the whole situation again to him, just like I told it to you. My manager looked at me and he was like, Freddy, what the fuck am I gonna do with it?" I was like, "What, man?" And he was like, "No, idiot." This is exactly what he said. He said, "No, idiot. You don't call Asian people Oriental. You call Asian people Asians. You call Oriental things. No, you call Asian things Oriental, like things. You call Asian things Oriental is what you call." And I looked at him and I was like, "Where the fuck is that in the employee handbook? I don't like. How am I supposed to know?" And then that's when I learned that. So don't ever call.
Well, see, now that one's a cultural norm, man. Because my understanding is, if you go to the UK, Asian actually refers more to Indian, Pakistani, Southern Asian, and Oriental would be, Chinese, Korean, Thai, all that. So. Yeah, hey man, you go to South Africa, black has a whole different definition as well. So I mean, it's
very true.
So but I learned the hard way. Don't ever call an Asian Oriental. Don't ever tell them to run from Godzilla. You do so. But yeah.
Quickest way to piss a Korean off.
Yeah, that is. Or no. Quicker way to piss off a Japanese guy. Call him Chinese. So vice versa. Call the Chinese dude. No, seriously, you call. Hey, Japanese. They get pissed off. The sad part about it is that you can't really fucking tell. It's like, and then I love, because it's happened to me before, and because they do this. It's like, dude, I'm not Japanese. Do I look Japanese to you? Motherfucker, yeah, you do. I mean, what am I supposed to say? So,
if you have to ask, assume the answer is yes.
Yeah. But and like it's hard. I experienced the same thing when I went to Puerto Rico. In Puerto Rico, like they don't like to be mistaken for Cubans or whatever. And it's the same, like you could put a Cuban and a Puerto Rican side by side, and because even the what do you call it? The dialect, is that what
Hey man, fucking Sammy Sosa, man, fucking he claims to this very day that he is from the Dominican
Dominican Republic.
Yeah, man, and it's like he's just clinging to that fact, and it's like, why, dude? You're talking about like a different side of an island. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Let's be real clear about this.
Yeah.
And then there's the skin bleaching, but hey, poor Sosa.
so like and when I went to Puerto Rico, like everybody noticed, of course, that I wasn't from there, and everybody was asking me. It was like, because over there the primary language is Spanish. So hey, ¿de dónde tú eres? And I was like, oh, I'm from, and I would tell him I'm from Texas. He's like, no, pero originalmente, and I was like, oh, mexicano, and he's like, oh, mexicano, sí, man, sí, noto, and I was like, yeah, and everybody was like so like friendly, like, you know what I'm saying? That's what I loved it about. I loved it over there, because everybody was like so embracing, so friendly, so. Same thing in I don't know if y'all ever been, but same thing in Jamaica, bro. When you go to Jamaica, yeah, man. Would you like a beer, man? I was like, hey, would you like some good, man? I was like, hell yeah, man, let's go. So I mean, like it was, they're very, very welcoming cultures. Now they say from Cubans. This is a little different. I can attest to that because I've met Cubans here in the U.S. I've never been to Cuba, but I've met Cubans here in the U.S. and I've never had an issue. They do have a short temper, but I just don't piss them off. I have a short temper too. That has nothing to do with whether you're Cuban or Asian or whatever.
I think one of the reasons people get offended when you compare their nationalities, their ethnicity with another one is because their experiences are so different.
Yeah,
they're so different. They've gone through so like different political, whatever they've gone through. Some of them have gone through homicides that are not homicides, but genocides that are horrible, and they are sometimes part of history. People don't know about them. So I understand why people do get offended. Like, why for them it's important that they have their specific
well, that's
the word I want to use. You know what I'm saying?
History. They got history, they got baggage.
They have but all of us do. All of us have that, and
it's like in that one movie, The Replacements. When the I forget their names, the black dude confuses the big linebacker with by a Chinese. I don't know if I know you've seen it. The movie.
Been a while, man.
He confuses them. He's Japanese and he calls them Chinese, right? Mm-hmm. And he's like, I don't know how you Chinese people eat all that rice and manage to weigh 850 pounds. And he's like, first of all, I'm Japanese, and he looks at him and he's like, it's the same fucking difference. Y'all do the same shit. It's the same. And he looks at him and he's like, China and Japan are two different countries, right? But yeah, as the more ignorant person, and I include myself, because apparently I made that mistake with Asian people. Like you don't. Like you don't know. Like it's like, but then again, on the same token, again coming back to like Asian people, how do you differentiate between like it's difficult.
Well, we're at this point right now where the conversation, when it comes to you must respect people's cultural whatever. It's like, okay, if we're talking socially, in a conversation, in the way that we communicate with each other. Great, but when it comes to brass tacks, actual solid facts on the ground, a conversation I've seen repeated a number of times recently is they're talking about people coming in through Mexico from Guatemala and coming up to the border, and it's like, well, why didn't they just ask for asylum in Mexico? It's like, are you aware of the history between Guatemala and Mexico?
Oh,
it's I mean,
the racism in Mexico itself. Like, there's so much discrimination, so much racism that I wasn't aware of till recently. And I feel very ignorant, not knowing my own culture or not seeing it. Maybe I was aware of it, but I just didn't see it and I just couldn't relate to it. And it's become so visible. So it's just out there. It's thrown at your face. And it's it's changing my perspective of who I come from.
Right.
In a lot of ways.
Well, I've had the conversation of trying to explain to somebody why, say people who are, traditionally from Oaxaca do not identify with a lot of the rest of Mexico. Mm-hmm. And it's like, and that's kind of an issue because Oaxaca is right down there on the southern border. And it's, you're having a regional civil war while you also have governments on both sides that are trying to get shit done. And, but that's what I mean about kind of, we're having a very complex discussion socially about what we find acceptable, how we need to understand each other just to communicate and live. But we also need to understand, and I've had this conversation with Freddy about the idea of, the really conservative mindset that, it's words mean this because they're in a dictionary and we do these things because this is how we do these things. Mm-hmm. And it's, you kind of sit that person down and you go, look, you need to understand the cultural differences in these various areas, because they have real world consequences. There are things that are going to occur if you act in a certain fashion. I was jokingly having a conversation with a conservative relative of mine a while back about the buddy of mine's an active duty Marine. And when 9/11 came around earlier this month, somebody must have said something wrong to him because he had one of those posts like, I don't care where you were on 9/11. Where were you when your country asked for defense and all this? And I'm going, he's back, buddy. He's back. First, I'm older than he is. And my, snarky off the hand response was, well, I was wondering why we were invading Afghanistan instead of Saudi Arabia, but that's just me. I'm just curious. But when they went into Afghanistan, they initially were going to send a lot of Arabic translators because a lot of the Mujahideen, the Al Qaeda encampments were, they spoke Arabic basically. Mm-hmm. The problem with that is they very quickly, when they got in there, realized that the Taliban, and along with the kind of ancillary, that may not be the right word, the larger forces that were Al Qaeda in that area were from Pakistan, were from Iran, were from all these places. Just like, well, shit, we can't speak Arabic. We got to speak Urdu, Pashtun, Farsi. And it's like, okay, get rid of the Arabic translators. It's like, if you show up expecting one thing, not understanding the history and kind of like, the Taliban and Al Qaeda were not best buddies. There was a lot of contention there, but the narrative that we had because of the fact that we weren't paying attention to these kind of things led us to a lot of missteps early on in that. I mean, that's assuming, first of all, that you don't just assume that the entire thing itself was a misstep, but that's another conversation. But there are just so many of those little details where it's like you don't have to be super sensitive. And, anytime, the white kid with the dreadlocks shows up, you don't go cultural appropriation. You just go, okay, sure. But kind of moving from that to understanding why, a Dominican doesn't want to be called a Haitian there's a long and again, very bloody history in there that like
that one, I do clearly understand, like the Dominican and the Haitian is, because there was a lot of bloodshed. And so but going back to Japanese and Chinese,
well, even there, man, the Chinese-Japanese wars from the early part of the 20th century. I mean, Japan basically controlled a large portion of Eastern China for a long while, man. And then there was the rapes and the murders. So yeah, and then every once in a while you get some drunk Japanese. As a matter of fact, I think some guy just got a Japanese politician got kicked out of Taiwan for they have a comfort women memorial. Y'all familiar with that? Mm-hmm. And he kicked it basically. Why? I don't know. Just that That's quirky little Japanese passion, I guess. I don't know. But he kicked the statue and they were like, get the fuck out of the country.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah, but
so and what I wanted, the cherry that I wanted to throw on top of this, like this whole piece of the conversation, to the both things that y'all put into it, as far as what you said of like not understanding, or you said the complexity of the issues that we're talking about and why we have disagreement, or why the thin line is there that should we cross, should we not cross, and why that understanding is not there, is I feel because of two very powerful things where we have failed. We failed as a government, we failed as a society. Number one is proper education. And what I mean by proper education is I just mean proper education on specifically this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel that we are no longer growing up educated on it. Secondly, and it doesn't have to come after proper education, it can go either or. But secondly, we don't know how to have that proper dialogue anymore. There's no dialogue exchange on this. Why? Because I feel, and yes, I'm going to say it, I feel that in today's day and age, we're raising nothing but little bitches. Oh, you can't say that. That's wrong. That's politically incorrect. That you can't do it like that. You're gonna, my favorite, you're gonna offend them. You're gonna offend this person. So you petrified. I can't see shit. And instead of doing that, you need to sit down with these, and this is the hardest part. You need to sit down with these kids and explain this and have this dialogue in a way that they can understand, so that when they grow up, they don't have this complexity that you talk about. They're still gonna have it, but at least I'm saying that they will have the tools necessary to navigate with people that don't know how to carry themselves in that situation. Will there always be confusion? Will there always be a misunderstanding? Yes, that's never going to go away. But the only thing that we can do is ease up into that situation as much as we can. And I feel that the way you ease up into that situation is by having the proper education and having the proper dialogue about it. You know, why is it that I can't call a white person this? Why is it that a white person takes this offensive? Why is it that a Mexican person takes this offensive? Like, understand the whys. And then again, at the end of the day, that person's gonna grow up and they're gonna make their own decisions. But at least they'll make their decisions with the knowledge, at least, that, hey, you know what, it's because of this or it's because of that. You know what I'm saying? And it's just like that is not happening right now.
Yeah,
like,
it's important to not have that fear of asking questions and not have that fear of learning, but that there is a lot of that fear of because you don't want to insult people, and you're afraid of that backlash. But it is important to learn. That's the only way you learn, by asking questions.
That, I think, is where people get themselves in trouble when it going back to the idea of kind of latching on to either labels or concepts or some banner to stand behind, is that you get to this point where where questions become an offensive thing. It's like, oh, you didn't know that? It's like, no, that's why I asked you a question.
Yeah.
If I can't ask you the question, you've just defeated any possibility you have of convincing me that you're right.
Yeah.
So
and the other thing, when somebody doesn't understand something, again, I love the way you said it. when somebody doesn't understand something, this society that we live in now, they're so quick to judge. They're so quick to point a finger. They're so quick to belittle. That's what I hate the most. They're so quick to belittle. So when I don't know something, when you don't know something, you say you ask these questions, questions. But when I ask those questions, don't belittle me. Educate me. Why is it? I don't mind being wrong as long as you tell me that I'm wrong and you show me why I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's the best way to put it. Yeah.
Then once I realize, and once you have made me realize that I'm wrong with validation, then I have no problem being like, hey, you know what? My bad. I didn't get it. Like Sean said, I didn't know. That's why I asked. But we're not having that conversation because society has figured out that it's a lot quicker and easier to point a finger and be like, it's easier to say you're wrong and I'm right. And that's it. I'm right and I'm always gonna be right. And no, we're supposed to be here to learn from each other. Now, once you've explained, this is another side of it. Once you've explained and they've explained to you what you supposedly didn't understand, but once somebody has enlightened you about the situation, if you want to continue to disagree, that's not a problem either. We can agree to disagree. That's fine. You can have your own opinion about it, but at least now you have your own opinion by you knowing the facts. You know what I'm saying? So, but this is not what's going on. And I think one of the biggest things, I go back to what I said earlier, this needs to start like at home. Like have the conversation with these kids of why stuff. And kids are like Sean said, even as a grown adult, but kids even more, they're gonna have this curiosity of but why, and why not, and why should I do that, or why are they doing this? And you need to be able to explain. This is a conversation that me and my ex-wife have like all the time. You know, that like we're gonna be straight with her child. Like, you know, we're gonna give her you know, straight answers. Like if she was she is a real regular person, you know, and we're gonna tell her, look, this is the thing, this is why, and it is what it is. Because I'd rather it be me give my kid the harsh truth than the world give her the hard. Because then if I don't do it and the world does it, she's gonna come back to me and she's gonna be like, why didn't you tell me, dude? If I would have known. And I mean, it's true.
And the unintended and often unconsidered consequence of that is it more or not more and more. Sorry, I'm about to overgeneralize here. You can see it often enough where somebody goes, well, my parents didn't tell me shit, so I don't ask them anything. You know, that's
exactly.
And the unfortunate part of that is, even if your parents were, say, you know, simple, ignorant folk, there's probably at least something they did right. They managed to get to this point in life and, you know, raise your ass up. So there's probably some information to be gained there. But if you kind of set that precedent of, you know, oh, you don't tell me things, well, then I'm not going to bother to ask you things. Yeah.
And it's because, and that happens like when Sean says, when you didn't have that dialogue, you didn't have that conversation. So that kid doesn't have the comfort, does not feel comfortable enough to have that conversation with that consenting adult that could give them that enlightenment. You know what I mean? If you don't have that, if you can't have that conversation with your parent, you know what I'm saying? So you, again, we go back to the same thing. You mean to tell me that if you can't have it with your kid can't have it with the parent, you'd rather have somebody else, explain that matter to your kid, when I guarantee you that other person on the street is not going to give them a word of encouragement willingly and with love. I mean, they're going to give them some answer, but it's not going to be to their full benefit.
Well, it's a great example of that is every time that they double down on abstinence-only sex education in some part of the country, you see the numbers come back, and it's like STDs are on the rise, teen pregnancy, and it's like, well, that just tells you that those households are not having those conversations at home. The second you stop having that conversation at school, they're not getting that information anywhere at all.
Yeah. And they're getting it from their friend, and then that's why they're pregnant at 15, and
right. But there's plenty
they're
of
pregnant at 15, and they're a grandma by the time they're 35.
All right, but the flip side of that is there are plenty of examples as well of kids that don't. I mean, they get that stuff from home, regardless of the fact that we have abstinence-only education here in Texas, we do still have a very, strong kind of, not always religious, but, fundamental family-based, like we're gonna sit down and have the birds and the bees talk. Unfortunately, I think you see it less and less because we do have that reliance on, they'll learn it from their friends, they'll learn it from media, they'll learn it at school. And as soon as the school stops teaching them anything, well, they're fucked. But we do still have that kind of streak of there are people out there doing the damn thing right. I mean, if there wasn't, we'd be way more fucked than we are now.
Yeah.
So, and granted, they're probably doing some other ignorant shit, but at least they're raising kids that know how to put a condom on and don't, fuck the first person you see.
True. And I think we just scared the shit out of her guys.
You did know.
The what?
No, you didn't.
Couldn't tell if that was contemplation or disgust.
Yeah,
No.
she was like,
I was agreeing with you.
Okay.
Because you had this look on your face of like, how did we get here?
How did we get here?
I was about, and all I was gonna say was, I told you. I told you.
Quote that Talking Heads song. How did I get here? Yeah. Let's to make an attempt at synthesis here. You got a really good response from your first book, right?
Yes.
Is there anything else? Was there a next project that was in mind, or are you still kind of waiting for that next concept to hit?
Right now, I'm just I'm working on a poetry manuscript, so I'm putting that together and trying to. Actually, I've been procrastinating. I'm not gonna lie, but that's my intent to put it together by the end of the year. So,
right on.
But yeah, right now I've just been doing a lot of reading and reading a lot of stuff that has been coming out by local authors and local poets. And it's amazing to see how much literature there is that's being produced by Valley folks. It's really awesome, and it makes me really proud to be able to call a lot of those people my friends.
Right on. Well, here's a question for you, because this is something I've been an idea that I've been banging around for a little bit as far as the comedy community. But is there what's the word I'm looking for here? Not genuine, a purposeful, intentional. Has there been any intentional effort to kind of get some of the local scene together and share ideas on publishing, on distribution, on basically the grunt work of the creative life?
There has been, for example, recently. I can't remember exactly when, but it's recently we had the Raving Press hosted their second annual book festival, and it's a literary festival that they've been having, but they talk a lot about publishing. Ceres, Jaime Magaña, who he has also been active in that, and so there have been a lot of different workshops and a lot of different how do I say, festivals that do talk about that. There's a lot of literary festivals that are popping up in the Valley. So, for example, coming up, it's going to be the Border Book Bash with PSJA ISD. Then with the McAllen Library, we have the South Texas Book Festival. And then coming up next week, the first week of October, we have the Festival Internacional de Poesía Latinoamericana. So it's a festival.
I can't translate for you because I don't know.
I should know.
The about 75% of that. So
it's an international poetry festival, like with Latin American authors, poets, and that's coming up very soon. But there's just so many literary festivals happening throughout the year that that offer those opportunities. Like the Valley International Poetry Festival, they had some workshops about how to perform your spoken word. So there's just so much happening, and most of these events are free, and they're open to the community, and people show up, and it's just amazing to see how many kids, how many high school kids are showing up to these events, and the interest that they have, and the fact that they have something that we didn't have. Those doors weren't open for us, and so it's just great to see that they have these opportunities, and seeing that we have youth that know that they can be the ones to tell our stories, to write our stories, to document our stories, and to have their own perspective and their own voices. It doesn't have to be like anybody else's.
Yeah.
So it's really cool to see how the community comes together, and people are willing to do this on their own time, for free without getting paid. So it's really inspiring.
Yeah, that's when you're doing something right. When the person that you didn't pay for the work they did comes back and asks, how can I help next time?
Yes.
Okay, I will gladly exploit you.
Yeah, I've done my job.
But that's when we were talking earlier about the idea of the communities kind of coming together. Whether it be the literary community or comedy, music, all of them do seem to be a little more tightly knit now. I think the internet plays a very big part in that.
Media, yeah.
Staying connected, as Freddy was saying about once you've made that connection, you have to kind of sustain it, otherwise it becomes useless. But there's also so many tools available to the individual artists and performers that you can get so much done just on your own, but being able to then take that increased productivity and then combining that with the greater network, you're able to share. There's more to share, and it's easier to share it when you have it. So yeah, I'm glad to hear that. I was asking specifically about the publishing and the distribution, because I've run into a couple people in the last few years who have self-published books, and now they've got a box of books sitting at the house, and it's like, what the fuck am I going to do with this? Have you? How did you publish?
I did actually. This one, I had several of the stories in there had previously been published in different anthologies, and so I decided to just compile them into one big book. But the whole thing about distribution, just like selling your stuff, you have to get out there and do it. You have to. It takes a lot of effort, but you have to do it. If you want to be selling your books, you have to be out there promoting them, and you have to go and do this all of the time. Most of the time, you have to do it on your free time without getting paid.
Right.
So I think that's the main thing. You have to make the effort, and you have to know that you have to be the one looking for those venues. It's hard work, and sometimes it's easy to give up because you don't see the results. You don't see the money. But you know,
we had that conversation too.
So. But at the end, by going to these events, even though you might not sell a single book, you're making. I realized I moved my hand. I talk a lot with my hands. It's important to make these connections. Oh, the connections are like super important. They, you know, people remember you and people invite you back to do different things, and that opens other doors, and you end up in places where people are going to buy your books. Right.
And just kind of being from that growing up in the pre-internet age, I for a long time had to fight that feeling of, well, I haven't talked to this person in 6 months. Maybe I shouldn't reach out. And it's like, no, it doesn't matter how long. If you remember when you met them and you're still connected on some form of social media, or you've got their phone number, call them. Just be like, hey, I've got a thing I'm doing. You'd be interested. 9 times out of 10, they're either going to say yes, or they'll reply back and say like, oh, I can't do that, but like, hey, great to hear from you. If you have anything else, let me know. And that 10th time you go, oh, okay, I'm deleting your ass off Facebook. Is there any conversation going on around e-publishing, either audiobooks or digital format for the text?
For the text, there are a lot. What I'm seeing a lot more is people going into social media and using video formats to share their work. For example, a group an organization that just got together recently because of the political climate and because of the border wall, are the Poets Against Walls. If you guys haven't heard of the group, just go to YouTube and Google YouTube Poets Against Walls, and you'll find a bunch of videos where we have a bunch of local poets who took their time and they went and they recorded their work through that. And by doing that, a lot of our youth at schools are being introduced to our poets and being introduced to the voices that we have here. And so they go in and because of social media, the youth or the kids learn about what's going on in the Valley. So that's a really strong group that right now is documenting what is happening, the Poets Against Walls. So there's definitely somebody that I feel like everyone should go out and take a look at the videos that are being populated.
That's great. I would, as you were saying that, I'm wondering if maybe if anyone's putting mind. I know a lot of the music scene down here is making more of an effort to document performances behind the scene. Yes. I could very well see somebody doing maybe a 90-minute, or hell, kick it off at 180 and let's do 3 hours of just going around and showing some of the local performances. I mean, don't get me wrong, we've all spent time at open mics. Occasionally you go, oh God, another one. But every once in a while you run into some people down here who can not only write extremely well, but can perform the shit out of it. And it's one of those where you go, tell me somebody's filming this, But I'm fascinated about seeing if maybe the local scene starts moving towards audio. As you said, the problem with sales with physical copies is you have to go out and sell the damn things. Even if you have an online distributor, you go like, hey, go here and you can buy my thing. And it's like, okay, then I still got to wait a couple, days, weeks, whatever, to get the book. Whereas with the digital platform or the digital formats, EPUB or something like that, or even audiobook, as I said, there are poets down here, or writers, or various stripes of creative folk that are really good at performing their own work, and you put that in an audio format or a video format, but not necessarily YouTube, which is where this will be going up. But well, even with YouTube, you do have the option now of doing the video on demand. Give me 99 cents and you can watch me do this thing. So I'm be curious to see what happens when the regional artists start embracing that idea of like, not only are we now connected through communication through the outside world, the fact that we live 400 miles from anybody, or well, that's being outlandish, but we live a long damn way from the rest of people. aside from the farmers scattered between here and everywhere else, yeah, major metropolitan centers where things are actually occurring and business is taking place are quite a long way from us. But through the internet, through having our stuff available in a digital format, where so a guy a while back had his the tickets to his show were also, they had a QR code on them, and basically by buying the ticket to his show, you were also buying a free copy of his digital album.
Oh wow!
Yeah. So I mean, just little things like that, where it's like, you know, if you can just walk up to someone and go, "Hey, I'm so and so, you know, here's my card," and they now have through that, either through, I mean, QR codes don't get used nearly as much anymore, but just some ability to go, you know, maybe you put a discount number on the card, so it's like if you use this to purchase my work, you're paying less for it, and we've made this personal connection, and you know, I've given you something. Me and Freddy have had that discussion about the psychology of marketing, which sounds like such a dirty word, but there's the little things, you know. You learn to smile and give a firm handshake, and you know how to conduct yourself in the business world. And there's so many tools out there that are available to creative types now. I mean, platforms to put yourself up for free, tools to monetize your work so that it's not just, you know, it's, I've seen a lot of stuff go up for free on YouTube where it's just like, hey, here's my stuff. And it's like, make them pay for it. Okay. The collection of poetry you're working on, is there a theme to it, or is it just you're still compiling?
Well, the general theme is the border.
Okay.
What we're living and reminiscing on how things were, and accepting all these changes and these transitions that we've experienced here in the Valley. So, but at the same time, I want to write for my family and my community. So, you know, it's writing about, and this is something that people have pointed out, something that sometimes I'll write about my family, and I don't see it as political, but somehow other people do see it as political. But, you know, I'm just writing for my family. I'm documenting what we're living, and everybody has different perspectives. So not everybody's going to agree with what I write about, but it's my perspective.
Yep.
We were actually having that conversation with Setas when we had him in here last week about the audience. The author is in no way in control of what the audience takes away from their work. Yeah. So at some point, I mean, you can be it's like, that's not what I meant. You're reading my stuff wrong. Or you can just kind of go like, oh, yeah. I'm glad you found that in there. You know, congratulations. So yeah, you can't be not necessarily upset, but surprised when somebody comes back and goes like, oh, when you wrote this, you meant, and it's like, I didn't. But that's very clever of you to.
The other thing that I've gotten is, you know, people have a perception of what poetry should be like.
Oh yeah.
The poetry that we grew up learning about at school, that was the only poetry we had access to. Now poetry is really different. It's poetry is the way we tell our stories, and the way we tell our stories in under 5 minutes. You know, so, you know, poetry is a way that we are sharing our stories with our community, the way we can share it with, for example, me, I could go to schools and share it with high school kids in less than 10 minutes, share several stories with them. And that's what poetry is to a lot of us. It's us being able to tell our stories, to speak our stories. But at the same time, because I write poetry for my community and I use the language we speak, and I talk about, you know, my abuelita or whatever. A lot of times I've been told that my poetry isn't intelligent, which what is meant is it's not academic. And I have learned not to take that as an insult, because I'm writing for my family and I'm writing for my community and writing for my people, and I'm writing.
That's when you reach into that bag of labels and just go, academic, I don't need that one. Thank you very much. Conversation we had at one point, Freddie, you were talking about the book that you put together and the using symbols, an eyeball for an eye and that kind of thing. And I think my comment on that was basically to the effect of, I think that can have a bit of an off-putting, I mean, don't get me wrong. Somebody who runs across that and they go like, "Oh, this is cool!" Like they're going to be into your stuff. I mean, that you've got a fan now. But it can be kind of off-putting to go like I get what you're doing, but I don't understand why you're doing it. Whereas I think the flip side of that argument is if you're genuinely, like you said, it's like I'm using not only the language to describe, but the language to kind of define. In a way, it's like this is not only I'm not only telling you about the thing, I'm telling you about how I would talk about the thing. This is the way the conversation would go if we were genuinely sitting down and discussing this.
Yeah.
So in that case, there's a little bit of a barrier of entry there where it's like, okay, if you don't know what abuelita means, then Google it. But then again, you got it kind of self-selective in a kind of way. If somebody picks it up and they go, I don't get it. And it's like, okay, then it probably, let's say 89% possible it wasn't for you anyway. It's there wasn't something in there that was going to, give you the artistic revelation that you should get from your art. If you're going to consume stuff, you don't have to read everything, there are a lot of people that should never read the great works of literature. On the flip side of that, there are a lot of people that should probably pick up at least one copy of the great books of literature because they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. But you're finding an audience, I'm assuming. The people you're getting a response back from the work.
Yes. And I think the best part about going out, and usually when I go read poetry, I don't go by myself. I get, I feel like my voice goes monotone after a while, and I don't want to torture anybody by reading more than 2 or 3 poems, because my voice is just, I can't continue without boring people. So usually I'll invite a group of friends, and if I'm going to a high school or a middle school, I try to take at least a couple of other people so kids can experience, the different voices and everybody's going to read or perform their work differently. And so if kids don't have a reaction or a response to my work, they're certainly going to have a response to one of the other poets. And the best thing about it is having children at the end come. They certainly don't have money to be buying books or be buying products from you, but they come at the end and they want to have those couple of minutes of interaction to learn about how they could write their own work. And so that's the best thing. That's the best thing, that they realize that they can be writing stories, sounding the way we speak, using the language that we use, talking about their family, about their parents, about el otro lado, the other side, talking about their community, about, the border life, and how it's something that can be universal. And it's something that you could find in literature.
Right. For various reasons, I've brought up Mark Twain on this podcast probably more than necessary, but I often like to use him as an example of, there are works that he did that are very, let's not say academic, journalistic, perhaps. He's speaking very formal, very grammatically, and all of this, and then you get into Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, or which is actually a very political novel. It seems like a goofy little, like, well, if somebody went back to, it's like, no, it's about politics and social construction, and it's a very weird novel, but the vernacular that's used in it, or something like Huckleberry Finn, where I've had people tell me that they can't read the book because it's just, or I think Tom Sawyer has that same thing where he's using that literally the dialogue of his hometown, and like once you get the feel of it on the page, it kind of self-explains itself. Yeah. That doesn't make sense. It's self-explanatory. It's the rhythm of the language kind of conveys to you the rhythm of the narrative almost. But on the flip side, he could go and do that, this other work that was, he was a paid newspaper journalist for a long time. And it's that idea of going, you don't have to speak in the same voice all the time.
Yeah.
And poetry is a great, I think, vehicle for that, because it allows you you're changing the tone and style almost with every piece. Not very rarely do you come across someone who is like, I use this model for every single poem that I write. And then you have so many styles of poetry. The haiku, for example, it seems silly. You go 5-7-5, or was it 7-5-7?
It's 5-7-5. Yeah. Have you tried haikus? I mean, bar haikus?
Bar haikus?
Like going to a bar, having a few drinks, and then trying to figure out haikus?
I've scribbled some stuff on a bathroom stall every once in a while, but that's not the same thing.
It's the best. Take a journal with you next time you go out to a bar drinking, have a few drinks, and then try writing some haikus. Okay. But make it a community thing. Don't invite other people too.
I've never had a round of a haiku cipher, but I've definitely sat around telling dirty limericks with a group of friends, and it's that same thing. It's such a simple format that you can, once you realize that it's, again, going back to the formalized writing styles where you go like, oh, I must conform my brain to this, and it's like, no, it's a simple pattern, and once you figure out how that works, you can do whatever you want with it, and the idea is the rules that do exist allow you to find the shades of nuance in your language. If you, again, going back to vernacular, trying to remember who it was. We were talking about word economy of words in comedy, and sometimes it goes down to shaving off syllables off of a word, even where it's like that sentence just doesn't work, and then you shave off that one syllable and like, oh, now it's sing-song. Now it sticks in the brain. Yeah. Now it elicits that response that you want.
And I do that with comedy. I learned that from Jerry Seinfeld about shaving down syllables so that it could actually make sense. But also when I wrote the poetry, the book, I used to do the same thing. I would shave off the syllables but that was more so that I could make, sometimes I needed to make that end rhyme. And it would only work by shaving the syllables off and just so I can get that one rhyme. And I'll never forget, sometimes on one line I would spend 30-40 minutes. It's just like, you're not going to beat me. There's got to be a way. And you subtract, you add, you flip it. And then finally, it's like a puzzle. Now it fits. And you realize that you just spent 45 minutes on one line. I was like, oh shit, I'm not even done.
And then you spend the next 3 days wondering how the hell you were saying it wrong for
exactly.
3 months.
Yeah.
How did those words even fit in my mouth?
Yeah. But, in poetry and in comedy, learning to play and mess with syllables is very very important.
And very much so. There is that aspect of you can speak very formally and very properly, and then you slip into a vernacular, and it's an indication. It's literally a spoken indication, but it's just a tonal indication to the audience that we're moving here. We're not, this isn't a straight linear narrative that we're going with. It's like, and now we're going down here. And it's it's a beautiful thing. It really is, because once you understand what it is that you're doing when you're doing it, I mean, because there's so much of this that you explain it to someone and they go like, I'd never do that. And it's like, I've heard you do that in the last 10 minutes we've been having this conversation. I've observed you practicing this. You just don't know that you're doing it. The same thing goes back to when we were talking about labeling, the difference between an emotional and a rational argument. You are not even an argument, but a discussion. You have to be able to have the discourse on both levels. You know, what are the facts and what are the emotions? You know, it's like, you know, you called me a son of a bitch. Did you call me that because you're disparaging the marital status of my mother, or you know, are you calling me that because you're just kind of upset with me and that was the first word you reached for? I mean, you know, yes, I am a bastard legally and technically speaking, but what did you mean when you called me that? You know, and that's a hyperbolic example, but those little things of the subtlety of our own understanding of language that we don't pay attention to. We're not actively trying to do these things. You know, it's like when you see somebody out and it's very clear they've just read some self-help book and they're trying to, you know, shoulders back and always maintain eye contact while you're doing this thing. And it's like, what the fuck are you doing? You're being weird.
Very true. But I just noticed. Let's go ahead and kind of wrap this up because it's 11 and I know you've been here for a minute. I don't know.
Very gracious with us. Thank you.
Yeah. I don't know if you have shit to do in the morning or not. Oh yeah,
Drink
I
coffee.
actually do. She works early in the morning too. I completely forgot about that.
I have to drink coffee in the morning. It's very important.
Yeah, me too. Tomorrow is gonna be.
Well, in that case, if there's anything you have coming, this is the portion of the show where we let you self-promote the hell out of whatever you have. If there's anything coming up, social media contacts, any of that, go ahead and let the people know at home.
Yeah, well, you can find me on Facebook and Twitter. It'll be Suapri, Suapri. And my blog is pcsuarez.wordpress.com. And that's about it. Right now, I'm just going to be taking a little break, trying to get that manuscript done, although really procrastinating, kind of doing nothing.
Where can they
find
Lots of
coffee and keyboards.
Where can they find the books that are already out? Can they still buy them?
They could. Probably the easiest thing would be going through Amazon, or if you go through my blog, you'll be able to find a list of some of the other publications I'm in.
What's the name of the book, by the way?
Cuentos Abuela Told Me That Scared the Beeswax Out of Me.
Okay, you did mention that earlier. Just wanted to be sure. Always mention it a couple of times, right?
Yeah, Cuentos Abuela Told Me That Scared the Beeswax Out of Me. There.
That's one of those linguistic tools I will point out there. Yes, by all means, maintain your shoulder straightness and maintain eye contact, but mention it 3 times if you want them to remember.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Priscilla, it was great to have you. Freddy, you want to give me your socials?
You can find me on social media on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Freddy G across the board.
You can find me at it's hatfieldstandup@gmail.com, as well as Hatfield Standup on Facebook and Twitter, and Sean Hatfield on YouTube, where you can find my solo podcast, Mad Laughter. If you want to get in touch with us about this here podcast, you can find us at bouncingbrainspodcast@gmail.com, as well as /bouncingbrains on Facebook and Twitter. And we're on Stitcher as well. And if you'd like to find the audio version of this podcast, the direct RSS feed, it's at shoutengine.com /bouncingbrains. Did I miss anything?
Google.
We're on Google Play, y'all.
We're on Google Play now.
Good luck finding it.
It's Bouncing Brains podcast as well.
Right.
Google.
I think you have to be logged in to get into their directory. I could be wrong about that.
Do you?
I don't know. Google Podcasts, yo. If you use it, you can find us.
No, something I learned is that correction. We're not on Google Podcasts. They're 2 different things. They have podcasts on the Google Play Store.
Okay.
And then Google Podcast is its separate thing.
Well, you're as confused as we are.
But you can find us in the Google Play Store is all I'm saying. Google Podcast will be coming soon. At some point.
Look for Bouncing Brains Podcast. You will find us. Bouncing Brains, not Bouncing Brain. Bouncing Brain is an EDM techno podcast. Not at all what you'd be looking for. Unless you're into that kind of thing, right? Well, again, I think we're covered. Priscilla, it was great to have you in.
Great being here. Thank you.
Glad you enjoyed it.
Until next time.
Night, folks.